Yikes. Hello, my friends. Jill Osborne from the IC Network. It is Sunday, January 4th, 2026. And it's time for another live IC support group meeting. I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I was talking with a family member who is dying of cancer, and I had to talk with them first. Now, I may have just screwed up YouTube. Shoot. Hold on a sec. Nope. Nope. Let me see if I can edit this real quick. Details, customization, shoot. Monetization, yikes. Hi there on YouTube. Listen, can you tell me if you have sound on YouTube? I don't think you do. Dang. Hi, Ann. Happy New Year, honey. Ew, what did I do? Hold on a sec. Can I fix this here? Nope, that doesn't work. You would think it would let me edit something here, but it's not doing it. Hello, YouTube. Listen, I don't know if the sound settings are correct. Can you tell me if you have sound? I clicked start stream before doing one last setting, so I don't know if you have sound or not. So let me know if you do or not. Hello, Facebook. Hello, my friends. Hello. Happy New Year. Woohoo! Allison can hear me on Facebook. That's great. The question is YouTube. I'm not sure. I might have to restart it on YouTube, but I need you to let me know. All right. So Allison can hear me on YouTube. Yes. Excellent. All right, my friends. Happy New Year. We did it. We got through what many would say is the most stressful time of the year, which is the holiday season. We're here, we're alive, we're kicking, and now we've got a new year. I don't know about you, but man, I am so happy to let 2025 go. Week 5 of the flu, still coughing. For anybody out there who's developed this latest super flu, it is difficult. It is a very, very hard flu. I've got a friend who's been in the hospital for almost 10 days now. So be safe out there. So my name is Jill Osborne. I'm the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. I am the national IC support group leader. I have been doing this for well over 30 years now. The longest serving IC support group leader in the world. Yep, baby, I'm here. When the critics said she'll never survive it, 30 years later, I have outlasted all of them. I'm here because I want to help you. I am here because I don't want you to suffer in silence at home alone. I am here because I want to give you hope and comfort and structure and education. Because guess what? IC in 2026 is very different than IC in 1996. We have learned so much about IC in the last 30 years. Most importantly, that we don't even think of IC as an incurable bladder disease anymore. We think of IC as a pelvic pain syndrome for which there are many potential causes. We now want to find out and understand what's triggering your symptoms. Normally, when I do these meetings, I have a lot of patient stories to share, but it's been a holiday week, so I don't really have any new, fresh patient stories to share, except for one who called me, who this week, because I worked all week, who had symptoms for a decade. And hadn't stayed up to date on the new IC stuff, was still doing bladder installations, bladder therapies, oral meds, not getting better, still flaring, still suffering. She hadn't read anything recently. She hadn't watched the videos or our new free masterclass on IC. And she was having a horrific flare, and she called and said, "I don't know what to do, Jill, please help me." I will tell you guys, I actually worked with somebody I worked with an 86-year-old woman on Christmas Day who called, crying on Christmas Day. I always think I have a little angel on my shoulder, and my angel on my shoulder, says, "This is an important phone call." And I actually answered the phone on Christmas afternoon and spent an hour with her, helping her through her symptoms. So, anyway, getting back to this other patient, bladder therapies hadn't helped, really suffering, kept thinking she was getting UTIs, urine cultures were negative. You know the drill. You have all the symptoms of infection, and yet your urine cultures come back negative, and you don't know what to do next. Eventually, some doctors will say, maybe you got an infection, we'll put you on long-term antibiotics. They don't work. Give a lot of money to the drug companies, but antibiotics in essence usually don't work. Eventually, they're going to say, maybe you've got some overactive bladder, or for men, maybe you've got prostatitis. Let's give you some bladder meds or some prostate meds. You do it. And then eventually they say, hey, maybe you've got this incurable bladder disease called interstitial cystitis. Here's a diet. Here's some antidepressant. Here's some Melmaron. I'll see you in 6 months. Good luck. And you're so happy to have a diagnosis, you're going to do anything. You're like, oh, praise God, now I know what's wrong. And you go home and you do everything. You follow the diet, you stop the coffee, you stop the soda, you start the meds. You be on meds for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The problem is you still flare. And as this one patient said, she's still flaring badly. Why? If IC were a bladder disease, surely bladder therapies would help. And I asked her, I said, well, honey, have they looked in your bladder? She said, yeah. And I said, what'd they see? Nothing. They told me my bladder was perfectly healthy. And I said, well, you know what? That's really, really good news. You got a healthy bladder. So now we have to look beyond the bladder to try to understand what is driving your symptoms. And she's like, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that. And I'm like, so for example, have you had a pelvic floor assessment? She said, no. And I went, okay, let's look at the symptoms. How do we differentiate between bladder wall driven symptoms and pelvic floor driven symptoms? Because they both cause frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. Okay. So bladder wall pain, if you had a legit wound on your bladder, a really serious inflammation on your bladder wall, say from chemotherapy, bladder wall pain is very sharp and very shrill. It feels like razor blades in your bladder. And if you've got a bladder wall issue, then let's just say you've got a wound on your bladder, like Hunner's lesion. So here's your bladder. As your bladder fills with urine, urine goes into the lesion, urine goes into the ulcer, it's going to hurt like hell. That's sharp pain. That's like putting acid on an open wound. So the fuller your bladder gets, the worse the pain is. And then once you pee and empty your bladder, oh, miracle, pain gets better. Okay, that's a symptom of a bladder wall issue. Sharp, shrill, patients describe it like razor blades or like ground glass. Okay. Pelvic floor pain, in contrast, going to cause frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, but it's duller, it's achier, it has a burning quality to it because a muscle that's working hard builds up lactic acid, and that hurts, that's uncomfortable. And these patients, myself included, are not driven by bladder wall volume as much as we are driven by sometimes pain after urination. So if we were doing a coaching session and I were to ask you, when is your pain the worst, before you pee or after you're done peeing? That's the single easiest question for me to ask. Because if your pain is worse before you urinate, then that's telling us we're dealing with a bladder wall issue. If your pain is worse after you're done urinating, that's pointing us to your pelvic floor, but there are exceptions to that too. Patients with pelvic floor dysfunction often feel a pulling sensation or a pushing sensation, or again, vaginal burning. But the easiest way to tell if your pelvic floor muscles are driving your symptoms is by how you pee. So you can check on the health of your pelvic floor every time you urinate. Because listen, if you can sit on the toilet or stand in front of the toilet and let it fly and you can pee like a horse, your pelvic floor is good. But if you have to hesitate 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds before you can relax enough to release urine, that's a really trick question, because the most important word I just said there is to relax enough to release urine. So if it takes a little bit of time for you to start your urine stream, or we're doing some starting and stopping, or your urine stream is a bit of a trickle, or your urine stream feels very narrow, that's telling us that maybe we've got some structural issues going on. Maybe we've got some pelvic floor issues going on. Here, hold on a second. I'm still coughing, guys, so you have to bear with me. Ah, thank you. So, you have to remember the bladder only knows one language: frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. Everything feels like an infection. A bullet wound feels like infection. A stab wound feels like infection. IC feels like infection. Bladder cancer feels like infection. The only way the bladder can tell you that that there's a problem is by giving you these symptoms of frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. Almost every IC patient assumes that they have infection over and over and over again, but you don't. For most of us, this is injury or trauma. It's going to be injury or trauma to the bladder wall. You could, for example, have chemocystitis, chemical injury of your bladder wall from going through chemotherapy, or from taking a medication that's very harsh on the bladder, like Augmentin, or if you're drinking a lot of diet soda, things like that. Those all have the potential of irritating the bladder wall. We're also going to look at the quality and health of your skin. The bladder. I mean, think about the bladder for a moment. Yes, Jane, I will. Think about the bladder for a moment. The bladder is the only organ in the human body designed to hold toxic waste, because the urine contains ammonia and urea and all sorts of bad things. So how can the bladder hold ammonia for hours at a time and not get damaged? It's a real evolutionary marvel, because it turns out the way the bladder defends itself is with a really thick, robust coating of mucus. So your bladder is like your mouth. It's a hollow organ that's wet and slippery on the inside. And that mucus is vital to its health and its ability to defend itself and protect itself. Unfortunately, mucus production is estrogen dependent. So what that means is when you're young and have a lot of estrogen, you have a lot of mucus. But if you're on estrogen suppression medications, if you're on birth control, if you're on Lupron for endo, if you're just getting a little bit older, you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, guess what? You don't have the estrogen anymore, which means you don't have much mucus anymore, which means your bladder's ability to defend itself has now been compromised. That is called estrogen atrophy. It feels like an infection. It is not an infection. It's dryness. And you're often going to feel it right in your urethra first. The urethra is the kind of canary in the coal mine when it comes to estrogen atrophy. So the urethra is going to often scream first. It will feel like there's a drop of urine stuck in your urethra that will not come out. You will have a lot of urethral discomfort. Another sign of estrogen atrophy is when your urine feels hot, like it's burning you. So as you're urinating, if your urine feels hot, like it's burning you, that's actually estrogen atrophy on your vulva. And we know exactly what to do for that. We're going to use a topical estrogen, and we're going to use vulva balm. The vulva balm is like becoming my all-time favorite thing now that I'm a little bit older myself. All right. Now, for many patients, as I say this frequently when I do these meetings, I love working with patients. It's what I do every day, almost every day now. is you guys are kind of like a needle in the haystack. My job when you talk with me and I talk with you and we're doing a coaching session is to try to visualize your pelvis. I want to try to understand your anatomy a little bit more and I want to understand your history a little bit more because my job is to make you more empowered and informed to get you back to that doctor with a new set of questions. So, what we consistently find in patients with pelvic floor dysfunction is a history of a trauma, a pelvic trauma, a bad fall on their tailbone, a difficult delivery. I was working with one patient who all of last week, whose all of her symptoms started after the birth of her second child, all of them. And it turned out she had very, very severe pelvic floor. She'd already been referred to the physical therapist. She'd already gone to physical therapy. She had stopped going to physical therapy because she just didn't understand it. Angie says here, my IC started after my hysterectomy, but I also have urinary retention from nerve damage, and you have an axonics nerve stimulator. My doctor did put you on an estrogen patch, but do I also need an estrogen cream? Well, the patch delivers estrogen throughout your body, which is why um, oral estrogen has a greater risk of cancer, whereas a topical estrogen cream delivers estrogen exactly where you need it, which is right down to the tissues of your vulva, your urethra, and ideally your vagina and your bladder. All right, so let me go back. Now, just so you know, I'm here as long as you have questions. Sometimes our meeting goes 5 hours, sometimes they go 90 minutes. I have no say in this, really. I am here at your pleasure. My only limitation is if I start coughing. So just fair warning. So let's go through some questions right now. Pamela said, I just did a bladder stretch and biopsy on my bladder. You have an IC bladder, but I was told this 26 years ago. You did physical therapy years and years ago. Okay. So Pamela, I want you to be really, really specific because IC on your bladder doesn't really mean anything. So what I want to know is what did they see specifically on your bladder wall when they did the hydrodistension? Did they see a Hunner's lesion? Oh, there's a squirrel. A Hunner's ulcer? Did they see inflammation? Did they see redness? What specifically did they see? All right. So you tell us that if you can. Hi, Joe. Happy New Year to you too. Jane says, can I speak about a degenerating disc and bladder atrophy? Well, not my area of expertise. So but there are a couple of different ways that I would look at that. Number one, atrophy. Bladder atrophy is usually associated with estrogen atrophy, vaginal atrophy, vulvar atrophy, urethral atrophy implies that we've got skin that is atrophying over time. And the very, very first thing we're going to look at in that situation is just the quality and health of your skin and your age, hun. The blessing here is we can reverse atrophy with estrogen, that we can get that skin healthy and strong again. Now, degenerating discs are tricky because, like, I have two ruptured discs in my back, L4, L5. Worst discs you can do because those are the discs and the area where the nerves go down to the bladder. Mine happened during a fire evacuation when my dad would not leave without me bringing his gun collection, and I had to drag an 80-pound gun collection up a flight of stairs, and I ruptured to death. The challenge again is the location and is it affecting nerves in addition to the discs, etc. So, like for me, for my ruptured disc, I feel it around my right knee. I've never felt it in my bladder. A very severe disc injury which is I think called cauda equina. I think that's the right term for that. Is that the right term for that? Let me look. Um, Almost requires immediate surgery because if you're incontinent, for example, yeah, it is cauda equina. So it's a condition that occurs when the bundle of nerves below the end of the spinal cord, known as the cauda equina, is damaged. Signs and symptoms include back pain, pain that radiates down the leg, numbness around the rectum, loss of bowel and bladder control. So, we don't have a choice. We've got to be doing everything we can to protect our spine. That means that we've got to strengthen our muscles. We've got to be more active. We've got to try to walk when we can, work on our physical fitness, try to lose weight when we can, try to be as fit as possible. And hey, man, it's a new year. If there is ever a time for you to make some changes, it's right now. Listen, one of the challenges that a lot of people struggle with is that if life isn't going your way for one reason or another, or your IC isn't going your way for one reason or another, you start clinging to what you're doing. It's like, okay, wow, I just need to keep taking my Almaran. I just need to keep, maybe I need to take more. Maybe I need to take more of this or that or this or that. And as our national guidelines say, if you're not responding to therapy, if you're getting worse rather than better, hey, hold on a sec, stop what you're doing, take a step back, revisit the diagnosis, because maybe those are not the right treatments for you in the first place. And the blessing of the new year is it's a new chance to start new things. From cleaning up your diet to trying to exercise every day to working on your mental health a little bit, working on stress levels a little bit. That's something that I'm always working on. It's something that I struggle with for sure. And more importantly, if you did physical therapy and you stopped doing the physical therapy, maybe you need to go back. Maybe we need to work on muscle health. The key here is that there's a terrible toll to having tight muscles over time. It's called ischemia or ischemia. The muscles get so tight, they squeeze the blood supply, and then the bladder doesn't get the blood it needs to be healthy. And then the vulva and the urethra doesn't get the blood supply it needs to be healthy. And then worse, the muscles start squeezing nerves, and then you get pins and needles and areas of numbness and persistent genital arousal disorder. Or in my case, I feel like I'm sitting, I have a vibration about an inch to the left of my rectum on the left side. That's an old nerve injury. It's been bothering me this month because I haven't been able to go to the gym because I've had this flu. So if you're not happy with where you are, maybe it's time to take a step back. Let's reconsider the diagnosis for a moment. Could we have missed something? It's always possible. What you shouldn't accept is I've got to be on this medication for the rest of my life. If you've got to be on a medication at a high dose for the rest of your life, then maybe that medication isn't helping you. Or worse, what you're doing is you're focusing on managing symptoms rather than identifying and fixing the underlying problem. And that's been the fundamental flaw of IC care in the last 30, 40 years is we are all focusing on symptom management because we all thought this was a bladder disease. So surely if this is a bladder disease, bladder therapies are going to work. But we knew in 2008, when the first physical therapy study came out, that physical therapy outperformed every bladder treatment like 3-1. And that was the moment the IC world changed. And that was the moment when everybody went, uh-oh, maybe this is not a bladder disease for some people. Maybe this is a muscle problem for some people. And now today in 2026, we now understand that 85% of IC patients have messed up muscles. 85%. And we know from research that when we get these muscles relaxed and released, when we restore blood supply, the bladder has a chance to heal. I was working with one patient 2 weeks ago, very, very severe pelvic floor dysfunction. Very severe pelvic floor dysfunction. And I asked her, I said, well, honey, is sex comfortable? And she said, no, it's always very painful. And I was like, wait, you've had this for 20 years now? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, did you ever ask anybody why sex was painful? And it's like, no, she just thought it was supposed to be painful. Well, it turns out her pelvic floor was locked down very, very hard, very, very tight. Anne says, I learned so much from you. Thank you. Angie said, my IC started after my hysterectomy. Very common. Again, yeah, I read this before. Angie, just so you know, pelvic floor injuries during hysterectomy are quite common. When I had my hysterectomy in 2017, I had pelvic floor spasms for about 10 months, involuntary spasms in my pelvic floor. Brutal. Every time I sat down, I got this really strong pulling sensation in my vagina. And I kept emailing the surgeon going, why do I have this pain? Why do I have this pain? What is this pain? It was very uncomfortable, really bothered me. And he's like, oh, you're just recovering. You're just healing. Give it time. Well, I had my surgery in May. In December, I was still struggling. Finally got in to see him. And I was up in the stirrups. He's looking at me and he kind of gasped and he goes, oh my God, I can see your muscles quivering right now. And I'm like, I know. I'm not making this up in my head. I know. And he said, so you're having involuntary pelvic floor spasms. I'm like, okay, what do we do about it? And she said, physical therapy. I'm like, sign me up, baby. Sign me up. I'm ready to do this. And he looked at me and he goes, well, you need to know that a lot of women drop out. And I'm like, why? And he goes, because it's painful. And I went, well, number one, I'm not a lot of women. Sign me up. And he was right. The first two sessions, actually, the sessions itself, I've never found physical therapy to be directly painful. I feel it when I put my clothes on and I walk back out to the car, and especially when I sit in my car. If I go from standing to sitting, God forbid I do it hard, that's when I know we've been working on these muscles. And he was right. I mean, I cried the first two sessions all the way home. But by the third session, guess what? It was better. Sometimes you got to ride through that as we're trying to restore these muscles a little bit. Jane said, I've been on estrogen patch and vaginal cream for 1.5 years, degenerative cyst, L4, L5, L5S1, 59. When my back hurts, my bladder is worse, and my bowel. Is pelvic floor therapy good for this? Oh, well, pelvic floor therapy is not going to fix a compressed nerve in your back. Is it going to prevent tight nerves from squeezing? Tight muscles from squeezing nerves? Could. It could. But I think you're going to have to ask the surgeon what they want you to do, because the fact that when your back hurts more, you're having more bladder symptoms, it's really pointing, you're kind of dancing with cauda equina a little bit there. And your doctor may have very specific things they don't want you to do. Like, for example, I can't imagine that you're being allowed to lift anything heavy. So you need to ask the doctor what the correct therapy for this is. Erin says, Happy New Year, Jill. Since my hydrodistension last month, I've been feeling great. Happy New Year to you too. And I'm so glad you're feeling better. Hi, Julie. Definitely muscles too. Jennifer says, hello from Scotland. I've been watching your lives for a while now, and you're so informative. I've been diagnosed with IC after having a bladder scan, which showed a very healthy bladder. I now receive Iola bladder installations every 4 months, and there's clearly nothing else they can offer me. After listening to you, I have booked a pelvic floor exam next week. I have endometriosis, and I've suffered from tailbone pain for 20 years. Girl, Jennifer, there you go, honey. We find so many tailbone injuries in patients with pelvic floor dysfunction. Like, that's the single most important thing you have got to tell that physical therapist. Remember, when you go to a physical therapist, especially for that first appointment, your ability to describe your symptoms gives them a roadmap on where to look. So you don't walk in and say, I have IC. Totally unhelpful. You want to walk in and say, okay, here are my symptoms. I'm having trouble sleeping through the night. I get a little vibration in my left butt cheek. Sex is painful, whatever. I might have sciatica, pain that shoots down my leg, or I have tailbone pain. Let me get my model here for a moment. And you guys, I am super casual today. You just gotta bear with me here. It is technically, I've had really, I just need to be casual today. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Ah, this lingering cough is annoying. Okay, let us ponder this tailbone thing for a moment. And we're going to do this by taking a look at your pelvis for a moment. So this is the front of your pelvis, obviously hip bone, pubic bone. And you notice that it's actually two bones that are connected because the left side of your pelvis and the right side of your pelvis mirror each other. There is a mirroring effect. Okay, so that's the front. So now let's look at the back. So here we have your spinal cord, your vertebrae and your spine. Then this triangular piece right here is your sacrum. And your sacrum are actually fused vertebrae. We call them vestigial vertebrae. And there are 4 holes on each side because your spinal cord comes down here and then it breaks into 8 sections and goes through these holes. Okay. And then here we go. Hello, tailbone, my friend. Now, y'all think, it's so weird that a human would have a tail. But there are infants that are born actually with tails, like they have to surgically remove them. They've got a tail. We can't move our tail voluntarily like a cat could or a dog could. But the reality is that not only do we have a tail, but this tail is the foundational center of our pelvic floor. And it's not hanging there doing nothing. It's got muscles that connect on the left side, muscles that connect on the right side. You'll notice the tail hangs down and curves under like this. See that? It doesn't go out, it goes under. And hangs straight down. It doesn't kink to the left and it doesn't kink to the right. It's straight. But if you have happened to fall on your tailbone or break your tailbone in 2 pieces like I did when I was 13 years old, when all this started for me, not only are you breaking the bone, you're breaking the connections. There's a lot of trauma that happens with tailbone injury. Trauma to muscles, trauma to blood vessels, and trauma to nerves. So the fact that Jennifer here, like the good thing here, girl, is that you got a healthy bladder. So that's important. So if you've got a healthy bladder, then would you be investing a lot of time and money in bladder therapies? I don't think so. Why would you do that? We have to follow the symptoms here. And the symptom here is that you've had tailbone pain for 20 years. So something happened at the age of 22. I'm curious, what happened? What do you think triggered that tailbone pain back then? Here, hold on a sec. Oh. This is the way I look every day, guys. This is the real me. There's nothing fancy in my home or in my office here. It's like, easy, comfortable shirt, ponytail, glasses, we're ready to go. Okay, here, hold on a second. All right, let me look at, so you guys on YouTube, be the squeaky wheel. I promise I will try to get to every question. So on YouTube, Christina I had the Axonics implant 2 months ago. No more back pain. I feel a little pain in my bladder, but if I turn the device up, so far so good. All right, good. A neurostimulator should never hurt, and you never turn it up to the point that it's hurting. That is, if you're triggering pain through nerve stimulation, you're probably damaging the nerve. So you really have to back off and not be really aggressive anytime you do any nerve stimulation. Harley says, bless you, Jill. Thank you for all that you do for us. I've learned so much from you. Happy New Year from Cindy in Michigan. Happy New Year. Right back to you, Cindy. All right, let's go back here to Facebook. Pamela said, no sex in 26 years. You have a wonderful husband. I have to say, like, I'm seeing somebody now. That's my news. And as I said to him, he lives in another county, so we can't really get together as often. Um, but what I said to him is, I said, listen, you have to understand fundamentally that I'm really broken right now. And he's like, I said, listen, I have no breasts. They are gone from breast cancer. And I have a half a vagina. So I am not a typical catch. And I have this, it's something that I've really been struggling with. And that is my identity as a woman. It's really challenged after you've had a mastectomy. But anyway, okay. So I'm like, okay, I have half a vagina. Can I have typical intercourse? Yeah, no, can't do that. That's from a hysterectomy. Okay. Angie said, oh my goodness, that is what has happened to me. Therapy was very painful for me and I would be in pain for days after. Yep, it can happen. Definitely, it can happen. Kimberly said, Jill, have you ever gotten on board with Microgen and Pathnostics? Absolutely. I worked with Microgen for many, many years. They actually sponsored the IC network for a couple of years. For people who don't know, next generation DNA urine testing is the future of urine testing. The urine cultures that they do now are really almost 100 years old, and the reason why they're so flawed is they use what we call a growth medium to grow bacteria out of your urine. So for those of you who had microbiology, you know what an agar plate is. It's a round plate like this. It has a base that has like a jello-like substance that we call agar. That's a medium. And then what we do, or what I used to do, because I did this in the lab many, many times, is we would put urine on it or whatever else we were sampling on it, close it up, put it in, its own little area, environmental controlled area, see what grows in 24 hours. My senior project 40 years ago was the isolation of drug-resistant bacteria, actually at Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, where I was born. And believe me, I found a lot of drug-resistant bacteria. So the fundamental flaw now with a typical urine culture is that it will only grow out bacteria that eat the food you put out. And some people estimate that urine cultures could miss 90% of the potential pathogenic infection. The challenge is that urine culturing is very inexpensive. That's what health insurance want to pay for. Health insurance companies want to pay for. But as many of us know, you can have negative urine culture, negative urine culture, negative urine culture, and yet eventually, if they do something called next generation DNA urine testing, they actually find infection. So what is next generation DNA urine testing? The word is DNA. So they don't try to grow anything. Instead, what they do is they get a little tiny sample of your urine, and I mean it's little, a very small amount of urine that you would send to that company, and then they break up everything in it. Any bacteria, any fungus, it all gets broken up. And then they look at the DNA, and the DNA will then tell them what bacteria is living in your urine. So a next generation DNA urine test will find everything and anything in your urine. So here, hold on. I have a sample of it. Hold on. Let's see. Is it in here? Yeah, okay. So here is a next gen report that I did a couple of years ago. Okay. And there's nothing personally identifying here, so I'm not worried about privacy. So this was actually done in 2019, and we did this. Why did we do this test? I think we did it after my history. Yeah, we did it after my hysterectomy. So my hysterectomy wasn't in 2017; it was in 2019, and my urine was very, very cloudy for months. I wasn't having symptoms, but my urine was very cloudy, and I'm like, "All right, what's going on with that?" And so we did a urine test and we did a vaginal swab. And here is the report for the vaginal swab. And you can see here on this side, whoops, hold on, that they found Lactobacillus gasseri. That's good. They found Prevotella, a small amount. What else did they find? They found staph and they found Gardnerella, but in very, very small amounts. But the really cool thing about a next gen test is this line up here, because they can look for antibiotic resistance genes. And so this will tell us if you have one of those superbugs, those really drug resistant infection. And in my case, every single time I've had this test done, I pop a drug resistance to a type of medication called amikacin, actually aminoglycosides, which is just another way of saying that. And the thing is guys, my training is in pharmacology. Okay, I mean, I did surgery for a year and drug development, and I have absolutely no memory of ever taking that antibiotic. None. So they either gave it to me when I was a child or they gave it to me during surgery. But it's weird now is I can never use that medication. It's never going to work for me. And then last but not least, they're going to tell you which antibiotics will kill the infection that you have, right? And they will also tell you if you have a fungal infection, which is cool. The fungal infection is down here. Fungal detected, fungus detected, none. So why is that important? Well, it was our own National Institutes of Health MAP Research Network who first found high levels of candida in the urine of patients with IC. And the more candida they found, the more pain that patient was in. So the question then is, why would we have candida in our urine? And the answer is that our biome gets destroyed by antibiotics. And if there's one group of patients massively overexposed to antibiotics, it's us, because we've all been given antibiotics, all of us, many of us for long periods of time, not understanding the damage that does to our biome. It kills the good bacteria, which normally control the candida, and the candida then grows. So I was on for pneumonia, starting the first Saturday after Thanksgiving. I was on amoxicillin for a week. Then I was on Augmentin for 10 days. And then I was on Z-Pak because I had pneumonia from this flu. And I got a yeast infection. 100% got a yeast infection. Ugh, so annoying. Okay. So anyway, Curtis Nickel at the American Urology Association a couple years ago said, guys, this is the future. Next generation DNA urine testing is the absolute future of urine testing. Everybody understands that. Everybody agrees with that, but the drug insurance companies don't want to pay for it. And because the drug insurance companies have told the doctors we're not going to pay for it, the doctors kind of poo-poo it. It's like, it's not that it's not valuable, it's that, oh, we don't want to pay for it, or maybe they haven't been trained on how to use it and how to interpret the results. Angie said, "Are we able to send that on our own, or do you have to have a doctor's order?" No, you can go to Microgen website and you can order it yourself for sure, but you will need a doctor's signature on the form that you get. If your doctor poo-poos it, they can set you up with a doctor in your area who can read it for you. Angie says, oh, Anne says, well, who reads the report? Well, you're going to read the report and your doctor's going to read the report. The reports are really quite easy to read. I mean, it's like fungus, yes or no? Drug resistance, yes or no? The challenge is understanding the bacterial loads. So, for example, mine, it was Lactobacillus gasseri at 92%. Well, you can Google that and see that that's a good bacteria. We're not worried about Lactobacillus gasseri at 92%. If I had Prevotella at 92%, or if I had a strep at 92%, that would be a significant infection. But mine were only 2%, which is probably normal in an older woman. Anne says your doctor won't do it. So then you can contact the company and they can refer you to another doctor. Um, you know, I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's a lack of training. Um, to me, it's just data. It's just data. And it's really, really important for those patients. Like I had a lady call me a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, who just flat out said, I'm refusing all treatments but antibiotic. The only treatment I will accept is antibiotic. And her doctor said, well, I won't give you antibiotics because I don't find anything. I want to give you something else. And she said, no, I only want antibiotics. And the doctor cut her off. So then she called me and she was really upset. My doctor won't give me antibiotics anymore. I don't know what to do. Well, my answer to her was, then you have to prove it. If a urine culture is not finding infection, that's valid. He's making the correct decision. But you can do a next generation DNA urine test. You can buy that yourself. It's like $190, something like that. Well, it was 180, 190. I think it might be 225 now. But anyway, you can order the test. And if that test comes back with 92%, 80%, even 50% strep or what E. coli, then man, you got an infection and the test just proved it. But if it comes back at 2%, you do not have a significant infection, and you will have to accept the fact that this test found nothing. So even though it feels like an infection, it's something else. It can be something else. And of course, there are people online who are selling the embedded infection theory, and there are people online who are saying you need to do long-term antibiotics, and they cite their favorite doctor from Europe. We just can't replicate that here in the United States. We don't have any data done by the U.S. National Institutes of Health with our giant IC research team, the MAP Research Network. They just don't find the smoking gun bacteria. They just don't find that. Christina says, new to this site. So glad I found it. IC got me during COVID. Struggled for a couple of years, not really knowing what this was. Ended up doing pelvic floor therapy, which helped. Fast forward to last week when it came back. Now you're looking for some relief. I'm wondering about the bladder builder you sell. You got pre-leaf. You started reading chronic pelvic pain. Waiting on my flare guide notebook. Thank you for being here. Okay, so Christina, we have a couple of thoughts here. Number one, COVID cystitis. COVID cystitis is absolutely real. It was researchers in Germany at month 2 or month 3 of the pandemic who first published patients with no prior history of bladder symptoms. Once they got COVID, they're called de novo cystitis. That means no prior history. they started documenting patients who suddenly developed all these urinary symptoms. And when they started studying the urine of patients with COVID cystitis, what they found was the same inflammatory cytokines that were damaging the lungs were also in urine damaging the bladder. And worse, they actually found active virus in the bladder wall, and for men in the penis. And so viruses have the potential, the COVID virus, the polyoma virus, the Epstein-Barr virus, they all have the potential of infecting the bladder wall and damaging the bladder wall. That said, COVID cystitis usually lasts about 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and then it usually resolves. I mean, I looked at the research again, I think like 6 months ago. So I don't remember seeing any paper that talks about COVID cystitis lasting longer than a year. So I would then talk about phenotyping for a moment, because while the timing of COVID is suspicious, there's also a chance that maybe you were in estrogen atrophy and you just kind of got to that point of no return. Or maybe at the same time you were doing what a lot of us were doing, which was we weren't working, we were at home sitting for long periods of time, and that was stressing our pelvic floor. I had one gentleman, I'll never forget him, he was an absolutely delightful man who, after like 6 months of COVID and he's sitting all day, and he just felt like he was getting very unfit, gaining weight. So he decided to buy a stationary bike. And so now he had a way to exercise at home. He had a bike, but he just wasn't exercising a little. He was on his bike for like hours every day. And he gave himself a massive pelvic floor injury. And so he ended up with severe pelvic floor dysfunction from sitting on the bike for such a long period of time. Now, the flare that happened last week, right after Christmas. So the very, very common. We have a lot of articles on how to prevent holiday flares. Holiday flares can happen from stress, from traveling, from damaging the pelvic, or vibrating, irritating, bouncing up the pelvic floor. Traveling is well known to trigger pelvic floor tension and pelvic floor discomfort. And then, of course, we have to throw in high levels of stress and food. So if you happen to be in that estrogen atrophy range, let's just say you're 55 and you go to Christmas at a family member's house and they make lasagna, which you've always eaten before. This time the lasagna triggered you badly. That could just be from estrogen atrophy. So you are truly an anatomical mystery to be solved. Now, bladder builder. Bladder builder is really, I think, the perfect supplement to try first if you are a bladder wall estrogen atrophy patient, because the foundational ingredient is chondroitin, and chondroitin acts to coat the bladder wall. And then it's got quercetin in it, which has an antihistaminic effect. It's got some beneficial probiotics for the gut, but it also has PEA in it to calm down pain and discomfort. Palmitoyl ethanolamide was found in 2019 to significantly reduce pain in the great majority of IC patients who tried it. 87% reported a significant progressive reduction in pain over time. We call this Peora or P-leaf. It's in the IC Network shop. It's what I take. I have a perfectly healthy bladder wall. I don't need to do anything for my bladder at this point. Estrogen atrophy hasn't really affected my bladder that much, but I do have a lot of nerve sensitivity from old nerve injuries and from tight pelvic floor muscles. So therapeutically, my goal is to calm those nerves down. And the way that I do that is with PEA Peoria. It's been life-changing for me. Um, when I went through menopause, how that happened, I don't know, but it happened because I feel 25, which is so weird. Anyway, I developed a very sensitive skin. I developed small fiber polyneuropathy, and it felt like I was being poked by pins all night long. I just got really, really bad. And then the PEA study came out, and I'm like, and I hate doing new things because I'm so freaking sensitive to stuff, redhead. And I finally one day, I just couldn't sleep without Vicodin, and that was bad. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try the PEA. And my skin is perfectly normal now with the PEA. I don't have the needle poking anymore. Robbie says, if the doctor sees all this data and misses something, they can be sued, so they don't want to order it. Good point, Robbie. It's a good point. Sandra said, have had this horrible syndrome since 2009. To this point, you've tried everything. The urology told me nothing works. Treatment made you worse. Okay, so Sandra, this is when we go to phenotype. Clearly, they did not establish your phenotype. They didn't even know about phenotyping in 2009. But that's what we do now, is we phenotype. Because everything you've done at this point in time hasn't worked. So now we got to figure that out. Is it because you have a fibroid tumor on your bladder? Is it because you have pelvic congestion syndrome? Is it because you have endometriosis attached to your bladder? Is it because you have a broken tailbone? Is it because you have tight pelvic floor muscle? There are so many things now that can cause all the symptoms that we associate with IC. IC is the ultimate grab bag diagnosis. If you've got frequency urgency pressure pain, they don't know why. They're going to say you got interstitial cystitis and send you on your way. We had a doctor say that 20 years ago, and we all got really mad at him because we thought he was dismissing us. But that's absolutely true. IC is the ultimate grab bag diagnosis. We all have the same diagnosis, but are we really the same? No. If you were to come to a support group meeting, and you're at a support group meeting right now, we should just be in Zoom so y'all could see each other and talk to each other, which I can do. We can easily set that up. But one of the things you see when you actually meet other patients in person is how different we are. My symptoms started at 13. Other people's symptoms start at 60. Same diagnosis, but are we the same? No. A lot of patients' symptoms start when they have a pelvic trauma, like having a baby with a difficult delivery or a fall. While for some, IC begins during COVID. Again, we've got the same diagnosis of interstitial cystitis, but are we genuinely the same? And the answer, of course, is absolutely not. We are not the same. And today, we now acknowledge these groups. We try to identify these groups because each group has their own treatment. So I use the 5-point phenotyping system. One doctor believes that there's 9 phenotypes. Another doctor in Europe, they actually think that there's how many? 5, 4, 16, 12. Is it 12 or 16? Might be 16. And our National Institutes of Health is focusing on 3, but they just merge a couple of them into the same group. So group number 1, Hunner's lesions. We now know those are linked to viral infections, so we're going to do antivirals potentially, or to a nerve injury. Group number 2, bladder wall driven. We're going to look first for chemical injuries to the bladder, like diet soda, or chemotherapy, or ketamine. We're also going to look for estrogen atrophy. That estrogen atrophy group is a really big group, and it's a really, really, really big segment of the IC patient population for women is estrogen atrophy. Not a disease. It's just a thin bladder mucosal layer because of the reduction in estrogen. Not a disease. Not a disease. We're going to look for pelvic floor tension. And that's actually what we find the most of. Is for patients who were diagnosed 20, 30 years ago, done all the bladder therapies, they really weren't checking the pelvic floor back then. Now we know to check the pelvic floor. And so what I would say to you, Sandra, is have you had a pelvic floor assessment? Because that could be a missing piece here also. Do you have positional symptoms? Are you fine when you stand, but when you sit down, it hurts? Or do you have widespread pain like I do, which means you've got multiple pain conditions? You might have IC, you might have vulvodynia, you might have IBS, you might have TMJ, fibromyalgia, migraines, etc. We now know that that's a central nervous system injury, usually driven by trauma. Like it's a real physical change in nerves from a traumatic event. It could be a major physical injury, or it actually could also be from a history of abuse. We have a lot of patients who have anxiety disorder. I have anxiety disorder. I've had anxiety disorder most of my life. And it's very frustrating. Why do normal things make me anxious? And it goes back to the fact that when I was quite young, I was extremely traumatized by, and I was attacked when I was in fourth grade by a young man who later became a rapist and murderer. I did not leave my home without fear for a decade. And it's interesting now at the age of 65, and I can go back and I can look at my life, how much of my life was controlled by anxiety from that trauma and influenced a lot of lost opportunities, a lot of things I said no to because my brain said, stay home, you're safe at home. And it still does that. Even though I'm much, much better and I've got good anxiety management tips, man, it is hardcore wired into my brain to be careful out there because I was attacked at a very young age, multiple times. So, Sandra, it's about your phenotype. I invite you to call me this week. I work with patients every day. It's free. You can just call. And if I'm available, I am more than happy to talk with you. And we can kind of try to phenotype you and see if they've missed anything. There are other phenotypes too. There's an autoimmune phenotype, although, there's a lot of competition right now about who's right and who's wrong. So it's just data for us. We just want to consider as many things as we can because we want to get to the root of why you have symptoms and try to fix it. Lori says, I just bought the multivitamin low acid with no B6. It helped tremendously. Yeah, excellent. That's called Bladder Smart. Do I have a bottle of it here? Yeah. Again, guys, I'm just super casual today. Listen, it's still technically a holiday. I am not dressed up in any way, so bear with my casual wear. Bladder Smart, our multivitamin. So I'm actually the person who helped to invent the very first low acid vitamin. I was on the phone with the CEO of Far Laboratories 25 years ago. He said, Jill, if you could make anything for an IC patient, what would you make? I went, oh, I know exactly what I'd make. I'd make a low acid vitamin. He said, why? I said, because I have patients call every day asking for a bladder friendly vitamin. Because the vast majority of multivitamins right now contain high levels of acid and are irritating. So if you're taking a Centrum or a one a day, you have to understand that their vitamin C is derived from ascorbic acid. It comes from the citrus industry, and it's going to potentially be irritating, especially if you're doing it on a daily basis. So I kind of planted that seed, and he called me back 6 weeks later and said, hey, I made you your low acid vitamin, which was cool. So the first multivitamin was a big horse pill, and it was just very difficult for patients to swallow. We sold it for a couple of years. Then that company had some issues, and I went to Natural Approach Nutrition, the same company that makes Bladder Builder and Peora, and said, hey, can you make us a low acid vitamin that will be easy to swallow? And that's Bladder Smart, and now thousands of patients are using that. I wish that I had the money to actually make these on my own, but darn it, I don't. but you can get these in the IC Network shop. Just go to icnetwork.org, click on the shop, and it's right on the front page. We have Bladder Builder, Bladder Rest, Cystro Protect. We will have again soon. It is supposed to be shipped to us on Monday or Tuesday. We haven't had it for 2 months. So Cystro Protect is back. Cystomen, Pre-Leaf. We've got the Femitry products, although I think we're sold out of one of them. So if you want to try any of the supplements, also know that our flare guide, which was my big project this fall, is now available online. And get it while you can. It's $16.95 in print. It's probably going to have to go up to $18.95 because the price of paper just went up. Again, it costs $11 to print this, guys. We're not talking big profits here. And then the new one, which I'm doing my final edit on, is the IC 101 diet guide. All the edits are done. I'm just entering the last changes, and it's going to go right to the printer tomorrow. So we'll have these by the end of next week for sure. I'm really happy with this one. So I got 2 brand new books that I know are going to help tremendously. And they're the first books, the IC 101 series. Remember, we have our here, hold on a sec. Okay. We have our free IC 101 masterclass online. It's all based on phenotyping. Your diet sensitivity is established by your phenotype. The types of flares you have are established by your phenotype. So my books were the first books to talk about phenotyping, and they're the only books still on the market today that do that. And every IC researcher now accepts phenotypes. Angela says, I feel like I'm out of treatment options. I've had this for 13 years. I was seeing Dr. Evans. I now don't have a doctor who has any plan to move forward. I'm in constant horrible pain. I don't sleep well. My whole body seems to be breaking down. I'm at a point where I feel like I may need to get my bladder out. I feel so depressed and defeated. Oh, honey, number one, just close your eyes and just pretend that I'm just giving you the biggest giant hug right now. I know how scared you are. Dr. Evans was the best IC clinician in the United States, in my opinion. He was always voted the top doctor anytime we did votes. We usually did them during IC Awareness Month. He won every single year. We stopped doing that when COVID started. Unfortunately, Dr. Evans developed a rare blood clotting disorder, and he now gets blood clots in his arms and his legs, which make it very painful for him to walk and work. He cannot do surgery anymore. He cannot care for patients now. It's been a year. So he hasn't said what he wanted me to tell you is that he's doing everything he can to come back to work because he knows you need him. And he's exploring every option they can find, everything. So he's trying to come back. The odds of him being able to come back, I think, are pretty slim right now. I got an email from him about 2 months ago. And, you know, it's been very difficult for him. Just like it's been very difficult for all of us who have faced unexpected health issues. So, you know, we're in this state where, not state of mind, state of the IC world, where our kind of world-class clinicians are aging out or are just unable to practice. The other great challenge that we have is that right now we have no IC funding at the National Institutes of Health under the MAP Research Network. First time in 1980s that there has not been a dedicated IC research team. And that's just heartbreaking. Unfortunately, the goals of this current administration does not support further research. I was involved in a study that was funded a year ago that has since been canceled. No explanation. Nobody could tell me why. And so it's absolutely heartbreaking what's happening. So the reason why I'm saying this is number one, we're not going to give up. I'm sorry, we're not giving up here. We're going to fight. And the way we fight is with knowledge. So just because we don't have a federal research effort going on right now, that doesn't mean that we can't kick ass in our local community. And what that means is that you have to embrace your power as an educator. Every patient walking into a doctor's office has an opportunity to change their mind about IC. You are the spokes in the wheel, for lack of a better term. You are everything. Because here's the thing, urologists, especially primary care doctors and local urologists, they don't go to urology conferences once a year. And they might go once every 10 years. They don't have the budget to do that. And if they do go to a national conference, they're going to the cancer class. They're not going to the IC class. You know, I've been to those conferences. You go to American Urology Association, there's 25,000 urologists there. How many are in the IC class? Maybe a couple hundred. And so our ability to get the knowledge level up at the local level has always been challenging. But that doesn't mean if we go in knowledgeable, informed, bearing gifts like hello, the flare guide, or some articles on our website that talk about phenotyping, and just try to peck away at them and say, have you considered this? Let's look at this. Do you know about phenotypes? I kind of want to take a deep dive into my phenotype because, hello, bladder therapies have not worked for me. I want to know why. Or, hey, doc, listen, we've been doing bladder therapies for 10 years, but here's the thing is every time you look at my bladder, it's healthy. So if it's healthy, maybe it's not my bladder, maybe it's something else. So I am not prepared to be passive. I am not prepared to walk into a new year giving up. And so what I would do, Robbie, is I would start calling pelvic pain doctors. And rather than walk, and I've said this for years, when you go see a new doctor, don't say you have interstitial cystitis. You will drop down the rabbit hole of old beliefs because you got to remember medical schools taught that IC was mental and emotional for 40 years before that's changed. I mean, that only stopped in 1990. Instead, I want you to walk in as a pelvic pain patient. Hey, doc, I'm here because I'm trying to understand why I have pelvic pain. Here are my symptoms. When I sit down, it hurts. When I stand up, it gets better. Sex is painful. I can't release urine easily. I feel a burning sensation. Orgasm hurts if you're a guy. Ejaculation hurts when you're a guy. Take the name interstitial cystitis out of every single appointment now, especially if you're seeing somebody new. Talk about your symptoms instead. Here's my symptom. Doc, I can't sleep through the night. I'm getting up every 30 minutes and I don't know why. Doc, whenever I drink a cup of coffee, I'm peeing for hours. Or doc, when I sit for a long period of time or have to take a long drive in my car, I just have to stop and go to the bathroom all the time. Or, whatever symptom you're having, focus on the symptom, less on the name, more on the symptom, okay? Because when you present yourself as a pelvic pain patient, you are an anatomical mystery to be solved. They're like, ooh, isn't that interesting? Let's see if we can figure this out. Maybe you've got endometriosis. Maybe you've got this. Maybe you've got that. If you walk in and say, I've got interstitial cystitis, they're going, God damn it, I don't have anything for her. I'm just going to put her on antidepressants. And you also have to understand, too, that urologists, It's interesting. We have a database of doctors on our website, and very hard to maintain a database. I'm going to tell you right now, they change all the time. We don't get paid to do that. So we do our best, but it's challenging. Um, we ask you to tell us what doctors have treated you well. We ask you to send us their names so we can add them. And what I would normally do, and what I used to do, is I would send them a letter saying, "Hey, you've been nominated to be on this doctor list because you've cared for interstitial cystitis, and here's what your patient said about you. Um, would you like to be added to our list?" And I've had doctors say, "No, I do not want to see IC patients. I'm a surgeon. I want to do surgery." And so, it's tricky. And also, based upon your phenotype kind of establishes the type of doctor you're going to be seeing in the first place. If you're an estrogen atrophy patient, your gynecologist can be your lead doctor. If you're a physical therapist, your physical therapist can be your primary doctor, or maybe an orthopedist. If you're bleeding from your bladder, you need to be with the urologist. But we're kind of spreading out now based upon your phenotype. All right, so Melody is seeing a Dr. James Olson, a urology specialist of the Carolinas. Excellent. Sorry, guys. All right, let me come back to YouTube here. Christina said, "Can I take a pre and probiotics with Bladder Builder?" Sure. Sure. You might need to take a little less, but I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it at all. All right, we've been going for about 90 minutes now. Now, I am willing to talk about anything. I have no shame. If you have rectal pain, let's talk about the rectal pain. If you got pain with intimacy, we can talk about that. If you're having trouble with a family member who's not getting it, we can talk about that. I am here as long as you have questions. Angie said, "Dr. Gotham Killick at UTMB, League City, Texas, has been wonderful with my treatment and symptom management. He even came and saw me in the hospital to check on me without a consult because he heard I was in the hospital. He truly cares for his patients." Excellent. So if you could pop me an email with his info, that would be great. My email is icnetwork@mac.com, icnetwork@mac.com. Pop me an email with any doctors or any physical therapists that you think have treated you well, and that would be great. Denise says, "Can you take PEA and Bladder Builder together?" You absolutely can, but you don't need to take a lot of extra PEA. You could just do like one extra PEA with the Bladder Builder, because Bladder Builder already has a little bit of PEA in it, but they designed them to be taken together. Hello, Brandon. Anne says, "Is mast cell activation associated with IC?" Absolutely. Let me, here, hold on. Let me show you why. Okay. So let us ponder the bladder wall for a moment. So this is an old Elmeron. Elmeron is the only oral medication approved for IC by the US FDA, but Elmeron is now associated with devastating eye changes and blindness and bowel disease. So Elmeron is now not nearly as used like it used to be, but their educational materials are really valid. So this is a kind of a side view of the bladder wall. So we've got the blue area, and of course it's not really blue, this is for educational purposes, is the mucosal layer. And you can see that the mucosal layer stops urine from getting anywhere. It keeps urine away from the cells. Your mucosal layer is actually an oil. It's hydrophobic. It pushes urine and water away from the cells, which is it's very light oil, but it still has an oily hydrophobic base. Underneath the mucosal layer is the urothelium. Okay, these are what we call umbrella cells. These are the largest cells in the human body. They're ginormous cells, and they have what we call tight junctions. They're very tight next to each other, so nothing can get through. Okay, and then underneath the urothelium is the nerves and the blood vessels, and the mast cells. So what happens when urine gets where it's not supposed to go? So here, hold on. I have to look at the right camera here because I have two different cameras here. Okay, hold on. Okay, here you go. So let's just say now that we've lost mucus from a trauma, chemical injury, or estrogen atrophy. Now urine is reaching the urothelium. Now, these are not passive cells. That when they sense a threat, when something is there that's not supposed to be there, they call for your immune system and say, help, 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 invader, invader, invader. And your immune system sends white blood cells to the area to kill the bacteria, if it's bacteria. But the challenge here is that there are also mast cells in this area. And when mast cells get irritated, they release histamine. So we used to call IC, we used to explain this as like 100 mosquito bites at once in your bladder. That when urine penetrates into the bladder wall, it does exactly what a mosquito bite does. The mosquito injects venom, and the venom then triggers the mast cells to release histamine, which then causes the redness and swelling. Well, when urine goes deeper into the bladder wall, it does exactly the same thing. It causes the mast cells to release histamine, which causes redness, pain, and swelling, which is why we do an antihistamine to try to block some of that inflammatory pathway. So yes, if you have an injured bladder wall, mast cells will be activated. Now, some people have something called mast cell activation syndrome, and that is a systemic issue where their body is struggling even more so. And that also, it certainly has the potential of affecting the bladder, and that is why you would normally be prescribed an antihistamine. And that's going to be hydroxyzine hydrochloride, also known as Atarax, or hydroxyzine pamoate, known as Vistaril, or sometimes they suggest an over-the-counter antihistamine. Brandon says, what do you recommend for patients that keep getting recurring UTIs? Easy. Prevent, my friends, prevent. Prevent is like Allura, but half the price. So it is what we call a proanthocyanidin product. Proanthocyanidins are the active ingredients in cranberry that help to repel E. coli, but it's not in an acidic form. So this contains proanthocyanidins and D-mannose. And so a lot of patients are using this when they struggle with recurring UTI. You can find this right in the IC Network shop. The more I talk, the more my throat gets irritated. So you could also do D-mannose by itself, but D-mannose is not as effective as proanthocyanidins and D-mannose. Brandon said, I'm so tired of the medical community telling me men aren't prone to getting UTIs. I'm 30 and I get UTIs very easily. Well, I mean, and that's something that we've really learned more recently. When you think about UTIs, most people assume that a UTI is caused by a bowel movement or by not wiping from front to back, or there's some sort of contamination. So, like from sex for men and women, it's easy to say, it must be from the last time I had sex. Well, here's the thing, we have now connected UTIs to food. So our superbugs, some of our superbugs come straight from factory farms. So there was one superbug. I can give you two examples. There were, this was probably 10 years ago, a group of college students in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho who all got this really rare, really unusual drug resistant bladder infection. And they were all living in dorms. And they were able to trace it back to a slaughterhouse and then to a farm that was using a ton of antibiotics. And the more antibiotics you give a meat animal, the greater the risk that that animal is going to start having a higher growth of drug resistant bacteria. Okay. And so these bladder infections were caused, and this happened in the United States by an American farmer, I think in Idaho or Montana. Okay. But one of the more severe ones actually started in Asia. It started in China, and it started in a community with a very large pork farm. And people in the community started getting this super infection that did not respond to antibiotics, and it was a bladder infection. And, so it kind of went through the public health pathways, and it's like, okay, we got a super drug resistant infection here. We got to monitor it. It took a lot of effort for these patients to get better. Then they found it in Europe. So in China, they traced it back to the pork farm. They found this exact bacteria in the pigs at the pork farm. So anybody eating that pork was exposed to the super drug resistant pathogen. Okay. So then a year or two later, the same thing happened in Europe. Super drug resistant bladder infection. And they checked the pork farms in that area. And yes, they found it in the pork farm. You gotta realize, I think it's like 90% of the antibiotics created never go to humans. They just go to food animals. I mean, our food supply is so badly corrupted by antibiotics that this should cause kind of catastrophic damage to the biome over time. It's quite terrible what's happened. So anyway, that happened in Europe. And then, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, this lady, I think she was outside of Chicago, she got the same infection, this really, really drug resistant super infection that was a bladder infection. And they kind of went, uh-oh, and they checked our pork farms and they found it on factory farms, where they use a lot of antibiotics. And some of you may remember the whole Costco chicken debacle, where Costco chicken, where you can buy the cooked chicken, and actually it's a really great flavor of a cooked chicken at Costco. But here in the San Francisco Bay Area, people started getting very, very ill. And I think some people died. Don't quote me on that. It's possible, but check that. And they were able to trace it back to a very specific farm. And they actually named the bacteria after Costco or Foster Farms, I think it was. And so that's why I think we're seeing a lot more difficult infections, is that it's coming from food. And so what I would say to you, and I actually have a chapter on that in our new diet guidebook, is I would stop eating any national meat products that we know are going to come from factory farms. Like buy local. That's what I do. I get chickens from Petaluma, I mean, Rocky chickens. They're from a local farm. It's not a factory farm. No antibiotics used. I get my eggs that way. I'm not eating red meat right now because I had my gallbladder removed, but I would get red meat from other local people. So just try to step away from the fast food. The problem with the fast food is we don't know where the hell that meat came from. That meat could have come from China. You have no idea where that meat came from. I mean, that's just not good enough anymore. For anybody who's suffering from recurring UTI, you just got to clean up that food and buy organic whenever possible. Nancy said, is there any connection between low estrogen and rectal pain? For many years, I suffered with bladder and urethral pain and was told to use estrogen cream to help with the dryness and vaginal urethral discomfort. I very rarely have this bladder urethral pain, but now experience rectal pain. It feels very dry and stinging pain. This is also low estrogen, and is the pain likely related to muscle tension? I was told that pelvic physical therapy may help, which I have tried, but has not helped very much. The pain comes and go randomly. Okay. So estrogen is all about mucous membranes. And so skin that relies on defending itself with mucus are going to be the most estrogen dependent. So would I expect estrogen cream to help rectal pain, anal pain? I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I have had moments when I have felt, and honestly, this happens all the time to me now. And again, guys, I have no shame. I will talk about anything. I have a very sensitive rectum. I can feel anything in there. Man, if there's a little piece of stool the size of sunflower seed, it bugs me. And that's because I have an old tailbone injury. All those nerves down there are very, very sensitive to me. And if I sit for a long period of time, I am going to start feeling rectal pain. It happened this week. And but the thing is that when I actually so what I'll do is I'll take my fingers like this and I'll go down my butt crack on one side. I never get to my rectum. It's always in my pelvic floor about an inch away from my rectum. That's where the pain's coming from. It feels like rectal pain, but when you actually palpate the pelvic floor is very, very tight. And sometimes it happened to me last night, because again, I've had the flu for 5 weeks now. And even though I'm better, I'm still not going to the gym. I'm not walking a lot. So, I'm sitting a lot. My nerves don't like it. I get Okay, so if we look at the pelvis from the bottom, right? And so this is just kind of assume your vagina's here, and so your rectum's kind of right back here. So rectum, sit bone. Man, this is my hot spot right here. This is my hot spot. This group of muscle between the rectum and we're missing the the first level of muscles in this picture. There's another level of muscles. So it's this area for me right here that is my absolute hot spot. And it's interesting because and I did it yesterday morning because I was starting to feel it. So I lay on my back and I put my feet up on the wall, but I actually kind of bring my knees towards my chest a little bit. And I actually, with my fingers from the outside, I massage right here. Like so I'm not touching my rectum at all. I am massaging right next to my sit bone. That's my tender spot. Man, oh man, oh man. And that's just from sitting for a long period of time. So you kind of have to, I mean, it's so hard here because nobody, working in this area is embarrassing and you don't want to tell anybody about it. And some people think it's dirty. And, some people, especially the older generation, were taught never to touch themselves or look at themselves. And this is kind of a part of the body that most people just want to ignore. But it's really fascinating, all these muscles down here. And when you actually look at it and you go, oh, that's why I've got pain right here, because there's a muscle right here. And I sat on it a lot, So it's okay to touch it's okay to massage the muscles. It's okay to probe with your fingers around your sit bone. And if you find anything tender, I just rub it in a circle. And it helps tremendously just to release these muscles that have been carrying my weight all day. Diane said, I had steroid injections into my bladder for the second time on November 12th. I have been feeling so much better since then. I only get up to pee 1 or 2 times a night instead of 4 to 7 times. And you can go up to 3.5 hours without needing to pee during the day, and there isn't as much pain. Excellent. So Diane had steroid injections into Hunner's lesions. Great. I'm really, really glad you're doing well with that. That's excellent. Robbie said, it's unusual to have IC with Hunner's lesions and lichen sclerosis. I have both, and I wonder if they're connected. I think that they are. So lichen sclerosis is interesting because my elderly mom had lichen sclerosis, and my mom had 3 babies. I was the youngest. I was a big baby, and she always knew where all the bathrooms were. Sex was uncomfortable for her, at least I think it was. She was pretty private about that. And as she got older, she developed vulvodynia. She felt like, severe vulvodynia. And then she was diagnosed with lichen sclerosis. So lichen sclerosis is like vulvodynia to the nth degree. But what's so interesting about lichen sclerosis is the tissues turn white. They lose blood supply. I mean, they're just pale. They're gray or even white. Well, grayish more. And so I would take her to her gynecologist, and yeah, because I was her caregiver and I helped with everything. And she'd be up in the stirrups, and the gynecologist and I would be looking at her going, yeah, you see that? And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, okay. So I'm intimately familiar with my mother's vulva and my dad's prostate and testicles. That's what that's what happens when you're a caregiver for somebody who is elderly. So what was so interesting is I always tried to give them dignity and privacy in the bathroom. I never intruded unless they asked me. So if they needed to have a bowel movement, I mean, he was 100, she was 94. They went to the bathroom, shut the door, everything was fine until it wasn't. And I had to my mom couldn't walk anymore. She had a bad hip replacement. I had to put a porta potty next to the bed because she couldn't walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night because she had frequency urgency for sure. Well, again, I shut the door, gave her privacy. I never wanted to take her dignity away. And then one day, and this was probably, she died in 23, it was probably 22. I walked by and the door was open. And she was on her, and listen, this is important. She was on her porta potty and she was like this. Okay. She had her butt in the air and she was straining as hard as she could. And I'm like stunned. And now I understand why I occasionally found poop in front of the toilet. This had been going on for years. I had no idea because I gave her privacy. And I see her doing this and I poke my head in and I go, oh my God, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, and she had this really, she was squeezing really hard. It's like, what are you doing? She said, well, I'm just having a bowel movement. I'm like, why are you straining so hard? And she said, well, I always strain this hard. Wow. Mind blowing. Mind blowing. So we didn't figure this out until the last year of her life. She had horrific pelvic floor dysfunction. Horrific. Her muscles were so tight, she had to push as hard as she could to get stool out. Her muscles were so tight, they had cut off blood supply to her vulva. Why was her vulva gray? The muscles were squeezing the blood vessels and she could not. They just were not properly supported. So I suspect that lichen sclerosus has a couple of different origins. I believe that one origin for lichen sclerosus is long-term ischemia and poor blood supply. I do. I feel that very, very strongly in my mother's case. And if you have Hunner's, so now, Robbie, now here's the other mind-blowing thing. Hunner's lesions. What causes a Hunner's lesion? Well, we now know that a virus, specifically the Epstein-Barr virus or the polyoma virus or COVID, but COVID hasn't been connected to Hunner's lesions, but Epstein-Barr has. We know that the bladder wall can be infected with viruses and cause a lesion. Okay, so that's firmly established. We have yet another new study, like 2 weeks ago, that came out that establishes that. But we also have now connected Hunner's lesions to a neuroinflammation, a nerve that is very, very inflamed. Because a nerve that is inflamed releases something called substance P, which damages tissue. Okay, so a couple of years ago, we had a case study published of a woman with severe Hunner's lesions who also had a severe prolapse. She had a bad, her muscles were very weak, they were very damaged. She couldn't urinate. So they went in surgically to fix that so that she could pee. And they made a stunning discovery that her uterus had flipped backwards. The front of her uterus was facing backwards and the back of her uterus was facing frontwards. Why? Because a ligament had broken. The uterosacral ligament had broken. So her uterus was free swinging on one ligament. Okay. So what did they do? I mean, they were stunned. So they moved everything around. They tacked everything into place. They repaired the ligament. And something remarkable happened. Her lesions healed. She is considered a complete and total cure. So let's go back to that concept of neuroinflammation. It turns out that this uterosacral ligament is actually a structural support for the nerves as they leave the bladder. Okay, so those nerves, you know, that are going out throughout your body, I mean, they're held in place by stuff. And it turns out in the pelvis, the uterosacral ligament supports the bladder afferent nerves. Okay. Well, the bladder, but probably efferent and afferent nerves. Okay. Anyway, don't get me there. Okay. When the ligament is out of position, it pulls the nerves out of position. When the nerves are pulled out of position, they become very, very inflamed. This is called posterior fornix syndrome. It is a broken ligament. It was discovered in 1991, and you go back to that early research, they're all talking about how this ligament thing can cause bladder symptoms. And of course, Western medicine fails because doctors play in their sandbox. You go to a urologist is going to assume it's your bladder. Are they going to look at the ligament? And this is why when you have that hydrodistension or cystoscopy and you got a perfectly normal bladder, like I did, well, then maybe it's not. Maybe it's not your bladder. Maybe it's something else, like the nerve that leaves your bladder that has lost its support or is because of a ligament issue or is being squeezed by tight muscles. So could that be an origin for Hunner's lesions? Yes, because the lesions healed when they fixed the ligament and restored the nerve position. So what the posterior fornix syndrome people say is, does this patient have a history of muscle issues? Does this patient have a history of prolapse? Anything. Because that all suggests that perhaps we're dealing with a ligament issue. So is there a connection? Easily. And that connection would be muscles and nerves and blood supply. So have you had a pelvic floor assessment? If you have, what did they find? What did they find? Were your muscles tight? Or are there any signs of a prolapse? If there are any signs of prolapse, rectocele, cystocele prolapse, then we want to start checking ligaments. And in fact, the posterior fornix people came out last year and said, hey guys, that's a phenotype of IC. That should be included as its own separate phenotype. And of course, the urologists are like, don't tell us what to do. This is a bladder disease. And it's everybody else is like, well, no, this is a pelvic pain syndrome. Posterior fornix syndrome is a potential cause of pelvic pain syndrome. I mean, our world has changed dramatically, guys, and it's a good change because we're stepping away from incurable bladder disease into pelvic pain syndrome with many potential causes. That's good because we don't want you doing therapies for 20, 30 years that have no chance of helping you. The challenge now is that our medical system is not necessarily prepared and trained to look beyond their sandbox. We don't have a lot of pelvic pain experts. And that's why your knowledge is so important here. And that's why I do these meetings so that you can see, you can see kind of these connections. Why it's the single most important diagnostic test now is not the cystoscopy, it is the pelvic floor assessment. Our guidelines say that should be done at the very first appointment. And if they find tight muscles, you are to be immediately referred to physical therapy because the bladder and the pelvis will not thrive with diminished blood supply from tight muscles. We have got to get these muscles relaxed, released, calm. Another thing to understand, if you look at the pelvic floor from the top down, listen, these muscles are flat. They live along the base of the pelvis because up here, there's stuff going on. I mean, we've got a rectum, right? So we can put the rectum in here. We've got, for women, we've got the uterus, right? So there are important viable structures in this pelvic cavity. So the pelvic floor muscles themselves are kind of like a woven basket of muscles that support the organs and hold the organs in place. The problem is when these muscles get tight, they lift. They lift up. And as they lift up, they start interfering with things. If you think about, okay, not that I have a bicep right now, but so here, I got to do it on this arm. Let's go on this arm. It's going to be even smaller on this arm. So this is a normal relaxed muscle right here, right? But if I pop my little bicep, You can tell I'm older. They used to be much bigger when I was playing tennis, but you can see that there's a little a little bicep, but that's the muscle doing this and kind of lifting. And when we relax the muscle, it flattens out again. And that in the end is the goal of physical therapy. It's to get these muscles back down in their proper position. I haven't been to the gym in 5 weeks, guys, so my muscles are shrinking like mad. I can't go back to the gym until I'm over this flu, this super flu. This super flu is awful, absolutely awful. All right, let me check YouTube here. Hello, EBW. Happy New Year to you too. I hope that you're doing well. I hope, guys. New Year. Oh, so here, hold on a sec. Let me pull something up real quick. I think we are all very happy to see 2025 go. Start of 2026 is a little rocky, but you know what? Listen, we're going to get through it. We're going to recognize the things that aren't working. We're going to have open minds, be willing to try new things. One of the things that I've done is, here, hold on. As a chemist, because I have 2 different college degrees in chemistry. I have a straight chemistry degree, and then I have a drug development pharmacology biochemistry degree. And here's the thing. I don't trust chemical companies. I don't trust the food manufacturers, but I sure as hell am not going to trust a chemical company like Monsanto makes glyphosate. Not going to do it. And so I am really, really removing as many chemicals as I can from my home. There are no scented candles in my house, especially cheap ones from China, because we know carcinogens often happen when they're burned. I have no oven cleaner. I'm using plant-based stuff. Man, I am just cleaning the chemicals or removing as many chemicals as I can from my home. And so that's what I did over Christmas, even on Christmas Day, because I was alone on Christmas. So, but here are 10 resolutions we all can make. So number 1, we have to listen to our body. There are a couple of ways this applies for patients with chronic pelvic pain. First, listen to when your pain and your symptoms are increased, and then take a break. If you're doing something that's hurting, we have to learn to listen and catch it early. Give yourself permission to rest and have downtime. Give yourself permission to say no when you can't manage something. But you also have to make sure you're listening to your body even when you feel well. Especially in the early days, we tackle all sorts of projects and chores on a day when you feel well, and yet that can often send you back into a flare, especially if you have pelvic floor. I mean, listen, if you got pelvic floor dysfunction, you got injured pelvic floor muscles, and you're feeling good one day, so you decide to go to the gym and do a massive workout and then traumatize your pelvic floor again. Yikes, that's never going to get you where you need to go. Number 2, track your symptoms. Just start making notes. You can start writing down what you're eating, especially if you're flaring a lot. Just start making a diary of what you're eating and what you're doing, and see if you can start making some connections between that flare and maybe periods of high stress, periods of stressing your pelvic floor or food. And also track your sleep. How are you sleeping? Number 3, stay hydrated. Man, this is something I'm really working on. I am now trying to start every day with a big glass of water. I'm trying to drink water all day. One of the reasons why I'm doing that is I went into AFib with this flu. AFib is often caused by dehydration. I was very dehydrated because I had the razor blade sore throat. And I think that's why I went into AFib. So now, unfortunately, I've got to be on blood thinners for 3 or 4 months, and that sucks because they give me GERD. Okay, so stay hydrated. Number 4, we got to work on the stress, man. The more stressed you are, the more intense your flares are going to get, and the more intense your pain is going to get. So if you can spend 5 minutes a day just being quiet, step away from everything, do some nice deep breathing. If you like to pray, pray. If you like to meditate, meditate. If you like to paint, do that. But we've got to step away from the stress and chaos of social media, of TV, and family drama. Try to find a quiet place every day and just breathe. Very important to start some low impact exercise. Man, I want you to walk every day, even if it's just up and down the street once. The more I move, the better I feel physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I would love to be at the gym right now, but I had pneumonia and I got to be really careful. Try a new icy friendly recipe a month. Why not? We've got a lot of recipes on our website. We've got a lot of recipes in our IC Chef cookbook. Um, uh, Advocate for your needs. It's okay to stand up for yourself with family, with doctor. You get to put yourself first. You don't have to hide what you're going through. Do things that make you feel good, especially with exercise. Um, Focus on your sleep. If you're struggling with sleep, you got to clean that sleep up a little bit. Your routine, get the phone out of bed, get the iPad out of your bed, put it to the side. One of the things that I've fallen in love with is on YouTube now, because I have Meniere's disease, so I have my ears ring all the time. It's genetic. And so I always have something playing in the background so I don't listen to my ears ringing. And I have fallen in love with these Harry Potter sleep stories on YouTube, and they're fantastic. They're like some of them are 2 hours, some of them are 6 hours, low, mellow voice, really great little mini stories. I listened to, I think, 2 of them last night. Beautiful fan fiction writing about, you know, just Google Harry Potter sleep stories on YouTube, search for it, and they're wonderful for sleeping. And most importantly, reward yourself. Listen, you have never worked more hard than you have at this very moment. You are trying to live your life despite the fact that you are in pain. And it is really hard to advocate for yourself when you are in pain, and yet you're doing it. You're calling the doctor, you're going to the doctor, you're caring for everybody else around you, you're making food for other people. If you're a mom or a dad, you're trying to keep your family hale and healthy despite the fact that you're peeing all the time and very uncomfortable. Pat yourself on the back. You are working damn hard every single day, and you deserve a reward. Anytime you do something hard, you deserve a reward. Reward therapy is very, very important. So that could be stopping and getting a cookie. That could be stopping and taking a walk, going to the local park for 15 minutes. It could be getting home and taking a warm bath or lighting a candle or asking your husband or your wife to cook dinner. You get to reward yourself. Don't put your needs on the back burner. And listen, ladies, and guys too, man, our self-talk when we're in pain and we don't understand that pain becomes very, very negative. And we start thinking, maybe I'm not a good person. Maybe I'm not a good wife. Maybe I'm not a good husband. Maybe my partner deserves somebody better than me. Stop it. Stop it. You're just hurt. Everybody gets hurt. You deserve the same care and love that somebody who'd gotten hit by a car would get. And if you saw somebody hit by a car, you would run to them, you would sit with them, you would, especially if it's a family member, you would ride in the ambulance with them, you would be at the hospital every damn day caring for them because you know that they deserve love and support. Why don't you deserve the same thing? Why don't you deserve their support? Stop hiding it. If you need help, ask for it. You don't have to justify anything. You just say, "Hun, listen, I'm having a rough day. I don't feel well today. I need you to, can you please make some food?" And if they can't do that, order some food. But stop subjugating yourself to everybody else because you're being a terrible role model for your kids because you're teaching them not to care for somebody who's not well. My mom, God bless her soul, was amazing if anybody was sick. She was at the hospital every single day. Every single day. You couldn't if I had to go to the ER, she was holding my hand in the ER. You deserve that. You deserve that amount of love and kindness and support. So that's what I wish for you for 2026. You have never been more prepared to deal with whatever happens to you because you are truly one day older and one day wiser. You are not the Jill of a year ago. You've learned a lot in the last year. You have learned a lot. You are strong. You are powerful. You can do this. But it begins with education. Are you willing to learn about it? Guys, we have a free video series on our website, the IC 101 Masterclass. Watch it. Come on. Watch one video a night. You can get through 20 episodes quickly. This is IC where we are today. Don't go to TikTok for IC information. Don't go to Facebook or a Facebook group or a Reddit group for your basic core IC information because it's biased. I'm trying not to be biased when I do these meetings. You got to study IC. You got to learn about this a little bit more. Invest in your knowledge because the more knowledgeable you are, the better you're going to be when you go to your doctor. And if a doctor has the audacity to say to you, this is all in your head, you're going to say, sir, I completely disagree. If it's all in my head, why am I peeing all night long? Sir, if it's all in my head, why does sex hurt? Sir, why does it hurt when I'm driving a long distance? Sir, why do I have wounds on my bladder? How dare you say to me it's in my head when you see wounds in my bladder? You can do that when you have knowledge. Then there's discipline. This is about looking at the patterns of our lives, the healthy patterns and the not so healthy, and changing things. If you're a wee bit on the heavier side because you haven't been exercising a little bit, get up and walk every day. Listen, I don't want you to walk 20 miles. You're not going to be able to do that. I want you to walk a quarter mile. I want you to walk a block. Every day, make a commitment to trying to improve your physical health. If you can go to a gym, start lifting a few light weights, not heavy weight. If you're struggling with stress and anxiety, it's okay to talk to somebody about that because stress is going to exacerbate pain. It's going to intensify pain. I shared that I did trauma therapy last year. I was just really struggling with the trauma, breast cancer surgery, and grief. And I still have moments, I describe grief as like being covered and paralyzed with tar. That's what I said to my therapist at the time. I feel like I'm just covered completely with the thick tar and I can't move. And now I have moments when I feel like my feet are in tar. I mean, it's way better because I did therapy. And I'm really happy I did EMDR therapy for the trauma. And I can see that there are moments when I would certainly benefit from more. No shame, no blame. Life is hard. Grief is hard. Trauma is hard. Cancer is hard. IC is hard. You don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who want to help you. You don't have to recreate the wheel on your own. There are people who've been through this who can help you. I can help you. A therapist can help you with certain things. A physical therapist can help you with your muscles. A psychotherapist can help you with past trauma. And if I have any regrets about my life, now that I'm 65 and now that I face, what could have been a terminal diagnosis. Thankfully, it wasn't. I look at I have much more clarity on what happened, and I don't blame myself at all for any of it. It was never my fault. Never my fault. I fell and broke my tailbone. And at the same time, I was attacked as a child by a guy who became a rapist and murderer. And that set the foundation for my anxiety disorder that I've had most of my life. It's very controlled, but occasionally it gets tweaked. And I have to work on it again. No shame, no blame. I've had one other very interesting reckoning. Um, I have a condition where if my stomach gets up, my heart goes fast, and it's called, I was uh, like Reinbold syndrome or something like that. I forget the name. Um, and I've had this since my 20s. If I get a lot of gas in my stomach, my heart starts going this, or I start throwing PVCs or arrhythmias. I mean, I remember the very first time it happened, and my dad had this too, and I've had it ever since. I've had it for 40 years, and I've always dealt with a lot of gas in my stomach. Um, and uh, I realize in hindsight that I really didn't give the FODMAP diet a chance. Now I'm following the FODMAP diet very closely, and you know what? Like 90% of it's gone. And so don't give up. Start reading, start researching, start learning, start trying. Just try new things. And if you need somebody to talk to, if you need a shoulder, I'm here. The IC network is here. We want to help. We sincerely just want to help. People ask, why do I do what I do? And the answer is, I want I want to give to you what I want to say to you, but nobody said to me in my 20s, um, it's not your fault. You've done nothing wrong. This is real and this is treatable. All right. So let's see here. Now, obviously, I can pretty much talk about anything. I am happy to talk about anything, but y'all got to give me some seeds here. So, you got any more? Do you have any more questions for me? I am not sure what's happening here on Facebook. Sometimes it hides stuff and I can't see it. Hmm. Normally, after this meeting, I would go for a long walk, but we have a lot of rain here. So, what I have been doing is I have been watching the latest episodes of Landman with Billy Bob Thornton. So good on Netflix. Danny says, why does somebody get IC? My daughter has IC and has endometriosis too. Okay, so Danny, IC is not the same in everybody. IC is a pelvic pain disorder with many potential causes. So some people get the urinary symptoms associated with IC from breaking their tailbone. Others get it from going through chemotherapy because the chemicals of chemo damage the bladder wall. A lot of women get it when their estrogen levels drop, because when estrogen levels go low, the bladder can't make mucus, and it's basically what we call estrogen atrophy. Those are not diseases, those are real situations and syndromes, mostly what we would categorize as an injury. So endometriosis is tricky. Endometriosis and IC have been called the evil twins because they have been known to um, appear in patients. Um, and it's kind of like the chicken or the egg dilemma, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And for the endometriosis patient and for your daughter, it's kind of like which came first, the bladder or the endo. Um, Endometriosis is there's a lot of new research with endometriosis. I will confess that I'm not up to date on the latest IC research. I mean, endo research. I probably haven't read it in a couple of years. Um, but it involves the growth of endometrial tissue uh, outside of the uterus. And endometrial tissue can be very rigid, it can be very binding, compressing. So, endometrial tissue can migrate to the surface of the bladder and it can actually burrow into the bladder. It can actually go from the outside into the inside and penetrate the bladder wall, or it can wrap around the bladder just like it can wrap around the bowel and start squeezing. It also can wrap around nerves, and so we end up with a lot of neuroinflammation. So so there are a couple of scenarios that would explain why if the endo came first and the bladder came second, why? We would wanna know, is endo attached to the bladder? We would wanna know, is endo influencing the bladder in any way? We would want to know how extensive and pervasive the endo is, and we have to assume that the endo has now created neuroinflammation, and that neuroinflammation in the pelvis is eventually going to work its way back up into the spinal cord, back down into the bladder because the nerves are shared at L4, L5. So, and we have to consider the fact that somebody with endometriosis, they're going to have very, very painful periods. And anytime you're in pelvic pain, your muscles are going to get tight to protect you from that pain. So we're going to start seeing a lot of muscle tension going on too. So there are a bunch of different things that she should be exploring right now. I mean, has she already had a laparoscopy and have they already evaluated the extent of her endo? It would be worth doing an MRI or a CAT scan to see if that might identify any endo proximal to her bladder, or at least a cystoscopy to look inside at the bladder wall to see if endo might be affecting it in some way. I would want her to have a pelvic floor assessment. Let's just see what the health of her muscles are, because if the endo is so painful and her muscles are tight, that's going to affect her bladder. And I will tell you, Danny, that the Endometriosis Association is an absolutely fabulous nonprofit. Um, One of the things that they tell their new members to do is to remove all chemicals from your home, like a scented candle, like we were talking about earlier. We have direct research that has linked certain chemicals that are called estrogen mimickers directly to the growth of endometriosis. Specifically, dioxin is one. Dioxin occurs when you burn plastic. And we had research back in the 80s that showed, I mean, there's very, very firm research that foundational research that established that chemicals can make endometriosis grow. And it's not just in the current generation. Sometimes it's the mother who is exposed to the chemicals, and somehow that gets passed down to the daughter. They have found that in animal studies. So I would encourage her and you to join the Endometriosis Association and go through their materials in depth, specifically look at their information on removing the chemicals from your home. I consider that a must. Oh, Danny says, thank you so much. She has special needs and is nonverbal. I watch her behavior. I read her so much on the group. I read so much in the groups I'm in to give me words to help her. I'm grateful for the words. She had a full hysterectomy at 28. She has bladder installations. Bladder is very small, holds 340. Honey, that's not small. That's not very small. 340, that's medium. That's not bad at all. Very small would be 25. I do not know with the endo. I did not know with the endo and the chemicals and the candles, and there are other chemicals too. So I have worked with other moms who have nonverbal children, often bedbound with like severe cerebral palsy and unable to communicate. And number one, you are amazing. Can I just say this right now? Your caregiving of your daughter is such a blessing for her, and I know it's terribly hard work for you. But may I just say, God bless you for watching over your daughter like you're doing. Understand too that caregiving is very difficult for you, and it's important that you have support and help. Don't try to do it all by yourself. I caregive my both elderly parents for 15 years, and at the end of it, woo, I was, I didn't even know how exhausted I was. You know, you just power through it because the work's got to be done. Um, I've had other moms say to me that they could tell by how they were squirming in bed how severe the pain was. And that's heartbreaking to think about, but that's like your best choice. It's interesting about words. She's cognitively there, right? So is she understanding what you're saying? It's just she can't communicate with you. So you're trying to come up with words. I'm assuming that you're using a diagram. I mean, it would be cool. I'm not saying this is the perfect diagram at all, but does she have the ability? I mean, you can get a better diagram than this online. Can she point to where it hurts? Or can you show her, does it hurt here? Or can you show her on your body, does it here, or does it hurt here? Yeah, I think she does understand, but she's completely nonverbal. She squirms and grabs her vaginal area. Okay, so understand, honey, she's had a full hysterectomy, so she is in menopause. She's in menopause. And so she's probably very dry down there. Are you using any topical estrogen? Do they have anything? And she grabs her rectum too? Okay. So, hold on a sec. So we're just going to go through a couple of things here. So, babe, this is your best friend. This is your best friend for her right now. Vulva Balm. This is an organic, it's an organic olive oil, sea buckthorn oil, right? And you can put it on her vulva around, and she can do it too. You don't have to do it for her. If she can do it, let her do it. She can put it around her rectum. She can put it, just a little bit. You don't need a lot, but it's a great way of kind of sealing the skin and protecting the skin so it doesn't get irritated by urine. So she has the estrogen and the Valium suppository. So then question number two, I mean, is she bedbound or is she mobile? Is she ambulatory or is she bedbound? I want to know, do the Valium suppositories help? If the Valium suppositories help, then that's telling us we're dealing with tight pelvic floor muscles, which is a very common thing to happen after a hysterectomy. She's mostly bedbound, mentally 18 months old. Yes. Okay. Okay. So the Valium suppositories are helpful. So what we're dealing with now, we know we're dealing with tight pelvic floor muscles. So has a doctor prescribed baclofen? I mean, rather than the vaginal suppositories, baclofen is non-sedating. Um, and it is a skeletal muscle relaxant that is very, very popular without the risks of sedation or becoming addicted to it. Although addiction to skeletal muscle relaxant, I think is a little bit overblown. But anyway, what about baclofen on a daily basis? That would be an interesting experiment for a couple of weeks. Baclofen caused her to be angry. Really? When is she in the most pain? Is she in the most pain at night or during the day? Baclofen made my face itch. And so I do Flexeril, which cyclobenzaprine. Flexeril is a sedating skeletal muscle relaxant. When I do it, I do a quarter of a pill. Was a baclofen in a pill with a score down the middle that you could cut? I I don't remember the baclofen that I took. I don't remember if it was in a capsule or a pill, but was it was there any way of reducing the dose a little bit? I mean, that's a score down the middle. A tablet with a score down the middle means you can usually cut it in half. Let me look up something real quick. Yeah, well, interesting. Anger is a side effect. Anger and irritability is a side effect of baclofen. I didn't know that, especially in people who take higher doses. Yeah, mood and mental health changes, including agitation. Wow. So you're taking tizanidine? Okay, interesting. So do you feel so the question then is, so she's still in pain. She's still like, does it work for a couple of hours and then does the effect wear off? Have you ever worked Okay. Have you ever worked with a physical therapist? I mean, for external exercises. I wonder if there's some exercises and stretches you can do with her um, while she's in bed. You know, I've got we've got some exercises here in our flare guide, but but they're not, except for this one, they're not lying down exercises. I wonder if pelvic floor exercises while in bed. Huh. It's not Kegels. You don't want to do Kegels. It's about relaxing muscles. It might be interesting to reach out to a physical therapist and explain the situation that you've got, you've got a child with what could be severe pelvic floor dysfunction, and how can you work with her while she's in bed? Like I explained earlier, the rectal pain for me is actually pelvic floor pain to the side of my rectum. It's like right here, and it's not in the rectum, it's here and here, just to the side of the rectum. I don't know how hands-on you are. How I think it'd be really interesting for you to talk to a physical therapist, not on behalf of your daughter. And I mean, have you tried, listen, I can't give you medical advice. Never my place to give you medical advice. My job is to get you to an expert. Um, One of the things an expert will do is gently palpate tissue, and it would be interesting to know, does she have low back pain? I mean, have you ever tried giving her a massage along her back, and is it tender around her hips? Is it tender, her legs? All that would be really useful information for a physical therapist. She says she's stable, but with the meds, her doctor also prescribed gabapentin suppositories and Dilaudid when it gets really bad. She was hit by a car. Yikes. Oh, honey. Yeah, that's a big injury. I mean, I'm assuming, have they done a CAT scan or an X-ray and just looked at her anatomy to make sure that we're not dealing with like a broken tailbone that's out of position? Because she's nonverbal, she's not going to be able to talk about it in a way that's going to be really useful for you. And if you think a lot of this began when she was hit by a car, like we had a patient, for example, a true story, absolutely true story. I won't say her name, but she was a longtime member of the IC network. And by the time I met her, she was like 21, and she was just very, very emotional, very hyper, kind of just very, very difficult, very, very, very emotional and upset and in a lot of pain. And for years, doctors had been saying to her that it was a mental and emotional problem. But her symptoms were so incredibly bladder centric. And one of the things that I said to her, and I've said to many patients, is we have to understand the anatomy. And her pain just got so severe that they finally just did exploratory surgery. Like, we have to understand this, because she was really suicidal. And when they opened her up, she had a catastrophic bladder injury, and that her bladder had basically been punctured for years and had been leaking urine into her belly for years. Oh, you want to know why she was so emotional and hysterical? Is because she had a catastrophic injury that had caused horrific pain. And when they actually visualized it and they saw it, they were like, "Oh my god." And there was no saving her bladder. They had to remove it. And you know what? That was the first step to healing. And she begged and begged and begged, and finally they opened her up and they found it. So, anatomy is everything. It would be fascinating and reasonable for you to ask, "Hey, this began after she was hit by a car." And I'm gonna say, the girl who had this catastrophic injury had been in a very, very bad car accident. That was her trigger. Um, it would be reasonable to ask for an assessment of her tailbone and her hips and her SI joint. For her tailbone specifically, I mean, has she had X-rays, a CAT scan, or an MRI, just out of curiosity? You're welcome, honey. You're welcome. You're very, very welcome. And please, feel free to call me if you need any other ideas and support. But the rectal pain, I'm thinking tailbone pain and car accident and hit by a car, man, there you go. There was another question here. Rebecca said, I had a hydrodistension 3 weeks ago. I had my Hunner's lesions burned, injected with steroids. Pain is about the same. I take Mirbitrek for overactive bladder. Is there something else I can do for the overactive bladder? Lactoferrin, honey. Lactoferrin. IC study a year and a half ago showed that red inflamed bladders became pink and healthy, and Hunner's lesions virtually disappeared after roughly 5 months of lactoferrin. And so, if we're looking for something over the counter, kind of as a normally you would do the lactoferrin before you would do the hydro, but if you have severe Hunner's lesions and you're in a lot of pain, your doctor is always going to want to look in your bladder, and if they find Hunner's lesions, they're going to treat it. So that's not a bad on the part of your doctor at all. But from a therapeutic standpoint, we generally want to start with the easy stuff with fewer side effects before we go to the more aggressive stuff. And the lactoferrin Hunner's lesion research was stunning. There is an article on the front page of our website about it. It came out a year ago last summer. 31 patients in the study. What made this was done at a university in Italy. The same research team had done a study 3 years earlier showing that lactoferrin helped prevent recurring UTIs. So what is lactoferrin? Lactoferrin is an essential part of our immune system. Our body makes lactoferrin. There is lactoferrin in our eyes, in our tears, in our vaginal fluid. Lactoferrin is considered a front line of defense against infection, bacterial, fungal, and viral infections. The biggest population of lactoferrin is in colostrum. So when a baby is born, that the first mother's milk that baby gets, there's a lot of colostrum in it because the purpose of the colostrum is to build the baby's immune system. That's what mother's milk does. Mother's milk feeds the biome. It's not just nutrition for the baby itself, it's nutrition for the biome and for the immune system. So colostrum is a really, and lactoferrin, well, colostrum is vital to building the immune system in the baby, and the biggest ingredient and protein in colostrum is lactoferrin. So again, lactoferrin is a front line of defense for our immune system. Unfortunately, as we get older, lactoferrin levels appear to drop. And so we have a lot of research now with a lot of different medical conditions studying the use of supplementing lactoferrin in adults, and would that help fight a variety of health conditions. And so this research team in Italy, they first tested lactoferrin with recurring E. coli infections, and you know what? It worked. And they were able to show that supplementing lactoferrin helped your body fight off infection. So anyway, the same research team did a study with IC. What was compelling about the study is that they looked at the bladder before and after treatment. So they documented Hunner's lesions, inflammation, et cetera, redness, et cetera. And they also measured systemic inflammation through blood testing. And then the lactoferrin came from Australia. And then they added two very minor ingredients to it, an alkalinizing agent. I think it was calcium. Anyway, at the end of that study, red inflamed bladders had become pink and healthy. Hunner's lesions were virtually gone. The quote in the study was, what was the quote? Something like virtually unrecognizable or something like that. And more importantly, systemic inflammation measured through blood testing had improved dramatically. So this was the first study that showed Hunner's lesions healing. So we shared that study, and then I found a lactoferrin from Australia. Australia is kind of the primo lactoferrin in the country. We don't want to do cheap lactoferrin from China because remember, it comes from cows, and we want to make sure that the cows are healthy and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, I shared that research about 15 months ago. Lots of patients have now tried lactoferrin. Didn't help everybody, but it's helped a substantial group of patients. The first patient who called me who'd been on lactoferrin for 3 weeks, she had been up every hour all night long for a decade. She had not slept more than an hour in a decade. 3 months of lactoferrin, she was sleeping for 3 hours at a time, and she was able to take a 2-hour car ride, didn't stop to use the restroom once. So I've had many patients call with very, very similar experiences. And then I've had some patients call who they've tried it and it didn't do anything for them. But lactoferrin would be very, very interesting. I think that would be a fascinating thing to try. And Danny, getting back to you for a moment, Peora, palmitoyl ethanolamide, would be very interesting because that calms nerves down and reduces pain. There were no side effects in the IC study. There's an article on the front page of the IC network on palmitoyl ethanolamide, PEA. Yeah, it helped, honey, but it didn't. Okay, the reason why it helped is because it silenced the nerves. It seared the lesion closed, but it didn't stop the cause of the lesion. I mean, that's, yeah, Danny, I can. The reason why, I mean, the biggest mystery in the IC world has long been, why do Hunner's lesions happen? Okay, because the lesions are stunningly painful because they're open wounds. And when you biopsy a lesion, it's filled with inflammation. Man, there is war happening. Your immune system is fighting like mad in the center of that lesion. There is a biological war happening. And the question is, what is causing that war in the first place? Well, now we know for some patients, it's a virus. It's a viral infection. And we have multiple studies now that have confirmed the presence of virus in Hunner's lesion patients. So if it's a viral infection, you know, the challenge is the virus is still alive. You might have seared the lesion, but once you have a viral infection, it just lives there. It lives along the nerves. It will go into remission, but then it gets activated, and then you're screwed again. Hello, herpes. So the lactoferrin is an antiviral. And that's why lactoferrin would be a fascinating experiment. And Danielle said, this is huge. It helped my pain significantly. Danielle, I'm not sure if you're talking about the lactoferrin or the PEA. Johanna here is saying the PEA 500 has been helping me a lot. And Johanna just said it. It's called PEA 500. It's right on the front page of the IC Network store. You can just go there. You'll see it. It's got a blue label. It's a blue label. And for the overactive bladder, the medication, if you want to start with a supplement, which most people do want to do, you could do, bladder builder or bladder rest. Bladder builder is better because it has PEA in it that calms nerves down. But the traditional medication that would be suggested is Mirbitric, MYR. Danielle said they both helped her. The lactoferrin and the PEA have been helping significantly, and her bladder is healing. That's what we like to hear, baby. That is exactly, a lot of people, understand, listen, when I started the IC Network, I was Miss Pharmacologist. I was traditional medication, evidence-based medicine the whole way. I never talked about supplements other than Preleaf for the first 15 years of the IC Network, and I've been doing this 33 years. Well, maybe the first 10 years. But what became crystal clear is that a lot of patients, number one, didn't have access to bladder treatments. They could not afford a urologist. They could not afford a bladder installation. They lived in a rural area or wherever, or they were very low income, and they simply, and we see this even more today. God forbid, I'm sorry for the people out there who are going to get ginormous health insurance bills this month. So what can somebody who can't afford traditional medicine do? And it became very clear to me early on that there was a place for over-the-counter supplements, provided that they were based on valid research. Danielle said it's the best she's felt since 2016. Excellent. That's what I want to hear. I love it. And there's nothing worse than being on a phone with a patient sobbing their eyes out in agony, and they can't get to the doctor, and they can't afford therapy. What's available for them? And that's one of the reasons why I really started looking at supplements more closely. And now, thankfully, the American Urology Association encourages patients to try supplements, because we have a good number of supplements now that have been created by researchers and doctors and really expert formularies who understand the complexity of IC. And so for Hunner's lesions and a very red inflamed bladder and chronic UTI, lactoferrin. That's the no-brainer. For a patient with estrogen atrophy, we're going to be looking at a chondroitin-based supplement like Bladder Builder, Bladder Rest, Cystoprotect, or Cystomend. For patients with chronic UTI, we're going to look at Prevent. For patients with nerve-centric pain, widespread pain, any significant pain, but especially the widespread pain, central nervous system driven pain, skin sensitivity, we're going to look at PEA. PEA is, that's the future. The biggest change, the future of the IC movement now, from a supplement standpoint, is PEA. There's so much research. It has an outstanding safety profile. The IC study was excellent, but it's been studied with surgical pain, chronic pain, acute pain, fibromyalgia, burning mouth syndrome, you name it, they've studied it. And it works, and it works by calming nerves down. And that's what I take, because I am muscle and nerve driven. There's no reason for me to take a bladder supplement. My bladder wall is healthy, other than it's a 65-year-old bladder wall. But whenever they've looked at my bladder, it's been perfect. So that's why phenotyping is important, so we don't waste our money doing therapies that have no chance of helping. And we also wanted to get into the mindset of not just chasing the symptoms. We want to try to identify the underlying problem and fix the underlying problem so you don't have symptoms in the first place. And with Hunner's lesions, that's going to be a viral infection, or that's going to be a posterior fornix syndrome, a very, very inflamed nerves. Those are our dominant foundational things about Hunner's lesions right now, supported by research. And if you have any questions, you can call me this week, and I'll be happy to show you where that research is so that you can look at it yourself. I wouldn't just want to keep cauterizing your bladder. We want to go a little bit deeper than that. From an anatomical, well, I didn't say that right. We don't want to just accept that. We can go a little bit farther and ask, why do I have Hunner's lesions? Danielle says, I keep telling my doctor that the supplements help more than anything else, and I've done. It's affordability for me, but so far my son has been willing to help me. Yeah. And I'm working really hard. You got to understand, listen, as tempting as Amazon is death by 1,000 cuts for small business. And so our prices on Amazon are often $3, $4, $5 higher than they are in the IC Network shop. And we have big volume discounts. So, we really try to make it work. And we just had a 15% off sale. It ended 2 days ago. So a lot of people stock up for the year when we do these big sales, but it's getting very, very hard to survive in the small business world right now. If you're doing anything on Amazon, they're just killing us. They're just killing all of us. It's so sad. Also, there was a discussion. Apparently, Amazon is considering stopping the sale of supplements altogether. I don't know why, but that's been a discussion in one of their forums. So if you come on over to the IC Network, we can send it to you, and then you help me do this work, and you help us pay for the equipment so that we can do support group meetings and all that sort of stuff. In other words, we can't do it without you. So please help us if you can. If you find these meetings helpful, become a member of the IC Network so you can get our magazine or buy something in the IC Network shop. It really helps. All right. Well, listen, we've been going for 3 hours, which is pretty good considering my throat doesn't like me talking right now. All right, I'm going to shut YouTube down. YouTube is done. All right.